Hello and welcome to Module 3, Section S of the Better with Less course, today focusing on paper clutter. To build upon last lesson where we were addressing digital clutter, paper clutter is a big challenge for many, but in this lesson I'm going to give you some systems that you can use and apply in your own life to help keep paper clutter under control, as well as help you differentiate between what to do with your necessary paper files as well as those desired paper files that aren't technically needed but you want to preserve in the best way possible. And I'll give you lots of strategies for these today. Let's jump right in. It's time to get into paper clutter. First, we'll begin with a paper clutter systems audit to help us understand our own personal struggles with paper. First of all, where is your paper clutter being stored currently? How is it stored? And can you consolidate it? Often paper clutter hides around a variety of locations in your home, so it could be helpful to try to consolidate it in one set place or a few set places where you know exactly where it will be, and so you can optimize the way it's being stored. It's also important to ask, how do you currently manage or keep track of incoming paper clutter? Much of the paper clutter you likely are dealing with are past examples of paper clutter, but unfortunately, it's impossible to completely shut down the amount of paper clutter coming into one's life. You can definitely reduce it, but it's never going to be completely shut down. So it's important that we set up effective systems to help us manage this incoming paper clutter and have a plan for what happens when we receive certain paper documents. And lastly, how would you like to keep track of paper clutter going forward? Hopefully it won't really be considered clutter anymore as we reduce it, but what is going to be a way or method that works best for you? Reflect about these as we go through this lesson. To begin, with whatever type of paper clutter you have, we're going to be sorting it into 3 categories: what's necessary, what's desired, and what's left. So what's not necessary or desired. And with this, you can decide. Some people kind of want to jump into all of their paper clutter at once. Others might work in smaller sections at a time. I encourage you to do whatever makes the most sense for your situation and the volume of paper clutter that you have. It may be helpful to go through things and sort them out at first between these 3 categories, and then once you have categories sorted, working through each category one at a time, but it's also up to you. First up, what's necessary? This is where we reflect about those essential papers that must be kept. There are many examples of these sorts of resources. They could include government documents, such as a birth certificate. It could include housing documents. This could be mortgage information or apartment leases. You could have car and transportation related information, insurance information, medical records, tax documents, and more. And you also might have important records for your job, your school transcripts, certain manuals that you prefer using the paper-based version instead of the online version. These are common examples of what we consider necessary or essential. With this in mind, how are you going to store these items so they are easily accessible? Oftentimes we save these because we will likely need them, whether it comes to our taxes or other financial issues. It's important to have these on hand and accessible. And so that's where having a set system can help. I know in my situation, I use a filing folder to keep track of the most important items. Moving into the what's desired category, this is where we want to think about papers that, technically speaking, we don't need to keep. There's not a legal or government-related purpose. It's more so because we personally want to. So some examples of these could include sentimental papers, photos, letters and cards, awards and certificates, maybe childhood records or some school papers, and anything else that is something that matters to you that would be classified as paper clutter. With these, it's very important that we reflect about how to store them. Now, since many of these often fall into the category of sentimental items, you could think back to a recent lesson we did on sentimental items and some of the strategies we talked about there to help you understand what you wish to keep and what your plan is for the space. I know we've talked about the one box method, for instance, where you limit the volume of certain types of clutter, in this case maybe sentimental paper clutter, to a certain size container. Ideally, with these desired items, of course, keep what you want to keep, but if we can streamline them and keep less, not only then are we keeping the best of the best, but we're more easily able to access and celebrate those best items without feeling overwhelmed and having to dig through a lot. So we really can give each individual item we keep more value if we're able to let go. After you've gone through both the necessary and desired files, what do you have left? With these items, consider letting go of them if they are not adding value. This could include a variety of things, such as old magazines or newspapers, maybe things that you thought you would read but are not going to, old receipts and records from so long ago they do not pertain to your taxes or any other official situation anymore, old school papers that either belong to you or from your children's schooling. Maybe there are old greeting cards that you saved, but they actually don't have a heartfelt message inside. There's no personal significance that makes it special. Maybe you have old coupons, junk mail, sales flyers that you didn't discard previously, recipes you never made or made but don't plan on making again. There might be old notebooks that you have, old manuals from appliances or electronics you don't even have anymore, as well as printed photos that don't actually mean anything to you. As you're going through these, if you feel any resistance to letting these items go, why is that? It's important to address that we do not need to feel shameful or guilty for letting go of these items. Everyone has to determine what is meaningful to them, and the blunt truth is that with whatever we're saving, after we're gone, most of our items are likely going to not be used and not be valued by other people. So life's too short to feel like you have to hold on to everything for other factors. This can be an important concept to remember not just for paper clutter, but for any other type of clutter too. There's no prize for holding on to everything the longest. You can't take it with you. It's about making the most of what you choose to keep and choosing to keep what is valuable to you, and the rest of the stuff can be dealt with. For any papers you're getting rid of, you could consider scanning these if you want to preserve a digital version of the file. Consider shredding it, either with a shredder or manually with some scissors, recycling it, throwing them away as needed. However you choose to get rid of them, make the choice that is best for you and the type of clutter you are dealing with, and move on. Of course, this lesson could not be complete without discussing prevention, because if we do not prevent new paper clutter from coming in, we are still going to have to deal with this in the future. And I've got 5 tips here to help. The first one, maybe the most obvious, is to reduce junk mail. Junk mail can be a big pain, and it's a little bit more difficult than unsubscribing from emails and just clicking the button, but usually you can call to get yourself removed from different junk mail lists. You can also recycle these things immediately. When you get the mail, walk them right over to a recycle bin. It can also be helpful to switch to paperless billing if it makes sense for you. If you've got internet access and are pretty tech savvy, this will probably be a no-brainer, but it can be a very easy way to manage bills and your accounts and dramatically reduce the paper coming into your space each and every month. It can also be helpful to keep a recycle bin or some sort of recycling receptacle in the house, having a set place where you can dispose of any unneeded paper clutter right away. As humans, we can be quite predictable, and if we don't have a set place for something that we know exactly where it belongs, we're going to set it somewhere random. But if you have a set location, hey, here's where I put the junk that I'm going to recycle, and it's convenient, we're much more likely to stick with it and do that, rather than letting them sit on the kitchen table, on the counter, on the coffee table, wherever you might be storing these items in transit. It can also be helpful to utilize the command center, which we talked about in a past lesson in Module 2, to help you monitor a lot of this paper clutter coming in, as well as how you integrate it with your schedule and that sort of thing. So if you haven't checked out that lesson, I would encourage you to do that or check in again to see if it might be a good fit for you. And lastly, try to avoid paper clutter enablers. A great example of this is a file cabinet. Now, the intention of a file cabinet is to store files, and of course I'm not saying declutter your file cabinet no matter what, but I know in the days before I was a minimalist, we had a file cabinet, but we actually really didn't need it, and it just made it too convenient to save everything because there was tons of space. After we got rid of it, we didn't have a place to store all of those items, so it forced us to really be intentional and go through it. And these days, we just have a small, basic file folder system that is a fraction of the size of our filing cabinet and so much more convenient. I love that it's portable, so if there was ever a major emergency, we could just grab the filing folder and go, and we'd have all the important documents we need, no matter what. So I encourage you to take a closer look at where your papers are being stored and see if maybe you can let go of some of these paper clutter enablers. Paper clutter can certainly be a challenge, but I'm hopeful that the homework resources will also help. Keep up the great work, and I'll see you in the next lesson.